I retired a couple of years ago, and and I was self-employed, so I had all this junk in my office, and it's taken me 2 years to clean get rid of all that, and start working on the important questions of life, like, is model railroading stuff really expensive? To me, model railroad stuff has gotten way more expensive. You used to be able to spend $2, $3 on a car, a box car, and now it costs you $30 or more. And people are saying, is that pricing young people out of the hobby? But I also know everything costs more than it did 50 years ago. Is it worse for model railroad stuff? And I will go over some numbers, but prices in the U.S. are on average 7.5 times higher than they were in 1972. What have model railroad prices done? And are there other things besides just inflation that have affected this? These are the inflation rates since 1972. Oh, and I should say, I put this together several months ago and sent it out to the people who attend the Board of Directors Executive Committee meeting. And someone said, and it might have been Glenn, hey, this might make an interesting clinic. So, and there was a little bit of discussion. But these are the rates based on the Consumer Price Index for urban consumers, which is the one everybody talks about when people say inflation's up 2%. That's the one they mean. Model railroad stuff is not included in this index. So, but I look at this and I find it not all that helpful. It does. Everybody in this room is probably old enough to remember back here. And some people have been saying, this has been the worst inflation ever, but no. If you're over the age of young people, that wasn't the worst. So indexing helps. What you do is you take this inflation rate, you set this at 100, and then say, okay, prices went up this much in this year, and they went up in that year, and it builds this red line. And they typically say, they set the index to 100. So if you stick all these inflation rates together, prices, the index now would be at 750.45. So something that cost $100 back in 1972 would cost $750. Oh, this is only through last year, because when I first put this together, we were only partway through the year. It should be like 752 or something like that now. And you can set that index for any year. In this case, I'm going to go back. The chart looks like it's moving because this is where I'm putting the index, and it's just hard to force that red line to stay in the same place. We can say, if something cost $100 in 2024, what would it have cost back in 1972 based solely on inflation? And it turns out to be $13.33. Okay. Now, according to the Consumer Price Index that we were just looking at, between 1972 and 1998, prices went up almost 4 times. And 1972 that's when I graduated from high school and sort of stopped buying a lot of model railroad stuff. By 1998, I was with a company that was sending me to conferences all over the country, and every time I went to a conference, I would find a hobby store and buy usually a box car or something. That would be very difficult to do now, since there's no hobby shops left in Maine, no model railroad shops left in Maine. There's only a couple in New Hampshire. There are whole states that just don't have it. Anyway, so over this 26 years, it went up almost 4 times, went from 100 to 389, and then between 1998 and 2024, another 26 years, this was sort of magic, prices went up almost 2 times. And you can't add these two numbers together just because of the way the math works. But over the 52 years, they went up 7.5 times. So I used locomotives, and I think they're all boxcars. Back in 1972, you could buy an Athearn Blue Box kit for $1.98. And I don't remember this because I don't have records for that, but I have the back issues of Model Railroader on disc. And I went and I found an ad from AHM. They were selling an Athearn boxcar kit for $1.98. And if model railroad prices rose at the inflation rate, that blue box kit would be 7.5 times more expensive, or $14.86 in 2024. But I went and looked online for what Athearn was selling boxcar kits for, and it's $35 to $50, which is way more expensive. That's over twice the price we would expect if the price was simply blue box kit increasing at the inflation rate. So that says it's going up faster than inflation. Yeah.
The first two were kits. Was this third one a kit?
Very good point. It is not. You cannot get a kit. And we'll go over all of that in a minute. So here's where I throw in the index. $1.98 in 1972. It would have been $7.72 in 1998. This is an interesting point right here for a couple reasons. And today it should be $14.86. Okay. There's going to be a bunch of tables. There's kind of orange tan boxes. I don't know what this computer and this projector will do to them. That's the actual price that something was. And you'll see white boxes with orange text show what the adjusted price, inflation adjusted price is. Okay? In 72, Athearn Blue Box 98, $1.98. In 1998, when I was conferencing all over the country, I paid $7.25 for a bunch of kits. But I actually paid $16 for an Atlas ready-to-run car. I've got databases with numbers in it. Never thought I'd really need them, but hey. And in 2025, I went online and you could get a roundhouse boxcar for $36, and you can get an Athearn boxcar for $50. And this is their, they occasionally realign their lines, and this is what we got. Okay, so the Athearn blue box. I'm off my mark. Is that?
That's all right.
Cost $1.98. According to inflation, should have been $7.72 and almost $15. I actually paid $7.25 in '98. Now, my job was, as a forest economist, we look at the world through kind of fuzzy eyes. The best way to do it, if you wear glasses, take them off. The world gets a little fuzzy. That's how economists see things. To me, these numbers are real close. These really support the idea that the numbers are working. So between 72 and 98, model railroad equipment went up at the inflation rate. But also, these are the same things. These are the blue box kits. Okay, and this is the Atlas ready to run thing. But here's today's prices, and they're way higher than this. So we've already started with this. The blue box kits, didn't have a lot of detail. Ladders were molded on, grab irons were molded on. The undercarriage stuff was pretty simple, but the 2024 boxcars are ready to run. They're highly detailed. They get all kinds of things added on. So the stuff we're buying in 24 isn't the same thing as we were buying in 98 or 72. So that makes me feel a little better, but then, kids still can't afford this stuff, or it is more expensive.
Yeah, the quality is better.
Yeah. And I don't have to take screwdrivers with me to assemble kits while I'm flying, which is a good thing because they don't let you take screwdrivers with you anymore when you're flying. Again, this is from an ad in Model Railroader, Athearn GP 35, $13. I bought an Atlas locomotive in 1998. I paid $50 for it. I also, for $65, I bought an SD40-2, but it came with a dummy. So if the dummy was $15, the locomotive was $50. They were both DC. This I've converted to DCC. This one has, instead of wiring in there, it's got copper strips. And someday I'll get to it, but this is kind of low on my locomotives to convert. Locally, I won one of these at the raffle at the convention. And I looked online and it's about 200 bucks. It was DCC ready and it didn't have sound. You can get an Athearn GP38 with DCC no sound for 50 bucks more, and you can get it with sound for $100 above that. So we're, $13 then, is it just inflation that brings me up to here? Well, no. Again, it works out pretty well that this was all inflation up to 1998, but between 1998 and 2024, something more than inflation was at work. And again, way more detail. You got DCC, you got sound, you got ditch lights that blink, you've got crews in there, you've got interiors. This has, I think it's got plastic glass, but there's no interior. So it's way more detailed. And the other thing, this is a little harder to track down. Are they more expensive than brass locos? Well, AI answered my question, and I got real concerns about the quality of AI. I've seen something where, forget what the question was, but the range, the cost was $4 to $8, minimum of $12. Well, I don't care what you're working with, you don't have to know the subject, but if the range is 4 to 8 and the minimum is higher than the range, anyway, so that's AI. An AHM brass locomotive was 50 bucks back in '72, and PFM, Pacific Fast Mail, was selling them for $200 or more. That's $375 to $1,500 today. And you can see that's way higher than this. Now, I never have owned a brass locomotive, but I've heard people talk about they look great, they don't necessarily run great. So that, these were some of the best things on the market 50 some years ago, but they're not as good as what we've got now. Okay, there's other factors in there, and I've hit on a lot of them. You get way more for your money now than you did back then. So it should cost more. It's a better model than it was. But labor costs have been lowered. All the manufacturing moved to China. Now, today, the US labor cost, which is wages and benefits, is about $40 an hour. In China, the labor cost is $6.50. So if we moved everything over to China, stuff should cost less because it costs less to make it. But it's not as labor intensive as it used to be, so labor is a smaller part of the cost, but it should cost less. The other interesting thing is tariffs. Now, I haven't been able to find anything since, found an article that said, stuff coming in from China, there's a 30% tariff. That was in May. And I haven't found anything to talk about how that's changed since then. But my experience, I bought a Walther center beam flat car to haul lumber. In 2020, I paid $30. I bought one 2 days before Christmas for $37. Now, different hobby shops, there's all kinds of things, different taxes, but $37 looks significantly higher than $30 to me. And so the tariffs should make things cost more now. But most of the rest of my numbers were through 2024 when they didn't have the additional tariffs. There is a competing version. So as I said, I sent this out to a small group. And Will sent a link, DIY Digital Railroad. This guy makes a bunch of YouTube things, and he addressed this issue, but in a different way. He was looking at starter sets from 1952, which is 20 years before my numbers, and he went through 2019, and he found it was inflation adjusted, that the 2019 price was the same as the 52 price once you adjusted for inflation. He also found that premium locomotives moved with inflation over that same time. So, it seems to conflict. Yeah.
I don't understand how you're using minimum wage
wage in here, because that's a set figure.
He, well,
And it's way less than inflation.
yeah, but he,
What's the question?
he was using minimum wage.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's a good question, and it made sense to me at the time. I'm not sure it's,
Unless he means, in
Oh.
fact, median wage. Because minimum wage is legislatively set.
yeah,
It's in steps.
but it
way
may
high.
not be the federal minimum wage. For example, in Maine, it's 15 now. I think federally it's still only 7.50.
90,
Yeah.
something.
I think he was using a minimum wage, assuming a high school student or a college student was working.
Okay.
But
But it-
Okay, but it still doesn't compute because it's legislatively set. You're
Right.
comparing something that changes organically with something that's set in steps.
what he was working on was how many
He's
hours.
trying to figure out how much money people.
Yeah, how many hours would you have to work to buy a starter set back in '52 versus how many hours in 2019? And yeah,
Affordability, not price. It's on the consumer end of it. He's
Yeah.
talking about the price moved with inflation, but the affordability moved with minimum
So it
wage.
can't be minimum wage, it's gotta be, it's gotta
Real
be
wages.
median figure or
the,
something like that.
the other thing, because it's a different time period, I used to work a lot with inflation rates because I was involved with people growing trees. And if you plant a tree now, the soonest you're going to cut it down is if you're in the South, you'll cut it down in 20 or 25 years. And the price is not, historically the price has never been the same. And having said that, it really hasn't moved in the South for saw timber since 2010, which is 15 years? Yeah. I'm reaching the age where I can't believe that that's as long ago as it is. But so people are working with inflation all the time because one of the ways they figure out how much to pay for timberland is what are we going to sell this stuff for over time, and you have to deflate it back. But I've discovered over time with that inflation and other things, you tell me what you want to tell your clients, what you want to show to your clients, and I will find you a time period that will help you show that. You know, sometimes if you move back 10 years, it changes the story a little bit. If you move forward 10 years, sometimes it makes it work. And I never makes it worse. I never did that, but that's a little bit about what's going on. Is that, you know, this Jay asked about a Varney dockside switcher that he paid a lot for. Well, he paid $15 for in 1948.
Correct.
You know, right after the war, there were things that were more expensive. So it's possible that between 52 and 72, some things didn't increase as much as others. So, you know, starting here, you get one solution. Starting 20 years later, you get a different one. But that's, yeah.
The other problem with that, my first thought when I see that is, I also know the quality of starter sets has not followed the boxcar thing.
This is true.
The starter sets they sell at big box stores are pretty much trash, and they're built for low cost.
Yeah, they're a lot like what was available in 1972. The only difference is they now have the plastic roadbed that snaps together.
Yep.
And that's about it, because it's still motor-mounted, truck-mounted motor, horn hook couplers. Couplers are truck-mounted. Yeah.
Art Fahey told Bachman, president, one time that these starter sets that you're selling at big box stores are doing the hobby a disservice, because you're killing the hobby for people that are buying these things. Yeah. So you know, when he says a starter set, there are expensive starter sets and there are low-cost starter sets.
I always thought if I was going to open up a hobby store, I used to think this 30 years ago, that I would not sell a starter set. I would sort of assemble my own with decent stuff. And it would be more expensive, but people wouldn't run away. Okay. So, in summary, prices are much higher, especially since '98, but the models, they're not the same. You can get you can still buy blue box kits at train shows, and they're still selling fairly cheaply. You can get some assembled ones back here
For nothing,
for
next to nothing, yeah.
3 for $5.
Yeah.
But, so, you know, this is a question for people who think they're way more expensive. Is the increase in quality worth the increase in cost? And you all may all have opinions on that.